Hello, and welcome to today's training for providers from the Kentucky Autism Training Center. We are very excited to be presenting on the topic of embracing sensory diversity, the importance of sensory spaces, and how to create them. My name is Tracy Belfield, and I will be one of the co-presenters today. Just a little bit about myself. I was a special education teacher in the classroom, primarily in the moderate to severe setting. Eventually, I moved up in my district and was a coach, and then eventually an assistant director of special education. And then a few years ago, I was privileged to come on board with the Kentucky Autism Training Center as a field training coordinator. You will also be hearing from Lindsay Eubanks today. We're excited to have her not only as part of our Kentucky Autism Training Center team, as a family and community field training coordinator, but I'm really excited that she's part of today's presentation because by trade she is an occupational therapist. And so as you'll see on the other side of our screen, there's a note that if you have access to an occupational therapist, it is always best practice to consult with them, as this is really their area of expertise. They receive the training and they have the knowledge, and again, it's just their area of expertise. So if you have access, you want to utilize them, which is why I'm excited that we're utilizing Lindsay today to help us in understanding and supporting the students with their sensory diversity needs and how we can implement that across the board. So we have three objectives we really want to hit today. The first one is to educate about sensory diversity, and Lindsay will do a great job of kind of helping us through that. And then we're going to highlight the necessity of sensory spaces and rooms. Again, we're going to really talk about both, and really honestly, we're going to focus more on those spaces because we know not everybody has a full room to dedicate to this type of thing. So we're going to talk about how you can use those really small spaces and still meet the needs of individuals. And then, of course, we want to equip you with the knowledge and tools to create that inclusive, sensory-friendly space within your respective environment that you have. So the first thing we're going to talk about is simply understanding the sensory needs and sensory diversity. And I say simply, but it's really not that simple. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay Eubanks, our occupational therapist.
What exactly are sensory needs or sensory processing differences? The term sensory needs or sensory processing refers to the unique ways individuals perceive, interpret, and respond. Perceive meaning to take in the sensory input, such as sights, smells, sounds, etc., from the environment and bodies to the brain. Interpret means to organize, filter, integrate the input, and decide how to react. And respond, that's spitting back out a response, ideally an adaptive response. An adaptive response indicates that the sensory information has been effectively received, interpreted, and organized by the brain. A person can produce an appropriate and functional reaction, a motor and behavioral reaction. For example, if a child hears a loud noise and then covers their ears, this action can be considered an adaptive response to the sensory input because it helps them cope with the discomfort caused by the noise. Or if a person feels unsteady while walking and adjusts their posture to maintain balance, they're making an adaptive response to movement input. So adaptive responses are seen as key indicators of sensory processing development. They are building more sophisticated neural connections. Now, there are different manifestations of sensory processing. There are 4 main sensory processing patterns in the literature for individuals with sensory processing differences. Some are similar, but it all comes down to the responses of the individual. There are passive responses or active responses as to how you would categorize each sensory processing pattern. The first one is hypersensitivity, hyposensitivity, sensory seeking, and sensory avoiding. Let's first look at sensory seeking. This is what I call a high threshold or a large gas tank type of sensory processing pattern, and it has an active response. If you see the picture here, it is a very large cup, and the person needs a lot of sensory input to go into the cup to feel regulated. That's why we call it a large tank. It's really a craving for sensory experiences, and it can often be confused with hyposensitive or under-responsive or low registration, because they also look like they're seeking input. So someone who would be considered sensory seeking or a high threshold, high large gas tank type of sensory processor may exhibit constantly touching people or objects, jumping, spinning or rocking, fidgeting, taking risks. They're the ones that enjoy loud noises. They enjoy being touched and tickled. Hyposensitivity is very similar with the high threshold large gas tank, but they're more passive in their responses. They have a reduced registration of sensory input, which means they need more sensory input to even experience or respond. They may be clumsy. They have some trouble with personal physical boundaries. They might be indifferent to pain and temperature. They do have a constant need to touch others, a failure to understand personal space, and an inability to sit still for long periods of time. Those are just some manifestations. Now, the other side of that coin is the sensory avoiding, and this would be a small gas tank. So if you see this picture, it's everything's full because they have a small cup, a small gas tank, and it doesn't take much input to feel overwhelmed. And with the sensory avoiding, they are more active in their responses. It can often be confused with over-responsivity or hypersensitivity. But again, the response pattern is the difference. So sensory avoiders are more active. They actively avoid the stimulation. They may run away from loud, busy environments. They cover their ears when overstimulated by noise. They may wear gloves to avoid touching certain materials, such as paint. And then the hypersensitivity, or the over-responsivity, again, has a low threshold or a small gas tank, but they're more passive in their responses. They still have a heightened sensitivity to sensory input. They are overwhelmed by sensory information, but they may not try to actively avoid the overstimulation. Instead, they just may display frustration. They may be easily distracted, irritable, cautious, and still uncomfortable in loud or bright environments. It is important to remember that a person can have one pattern in one environment and a totally opposite pattern within a different scenario. So no one responds the same to all sensory input. And a fun fact, an individual's sensory processing style may be a major factor in their personality development. That's from Aaron and Aaron. So what exactly does sensory processing include? The first sensory processing system we're going to discuss is visual processing. Pretty obvious, that means your sight or your vision. It uses the eyes to collect information and then the brain interprets it. It works very closely with other systems. It helps us safely navigate and locate objects in our environment. Some differences may look like if a student or a child or even an adult is having difficulties with visual processing, they may have trouble focusing, be easily distracted, overstimulated in busy visual environments such as classrooms with wall-to-wall posters or things hanging from the ceiling. They may have trouble with reading and visual tracking, and they may have difficulty tolerating changes in light, like fluorescent lights, or going from inside to outside. The next system is auditory processing, or sound and hearing. This sense helps us detect noise and sound and process it in the brain, and it helps us determine if a sound is dangerous, alerting, quiet, or calm, and very important for listening, communication, and social skills. Differences might look like misinterpreting verbal information. That would be under-responsive. They are not registering the verbal information well. They might miss parts of sentences. That's also under-responsive. Or they might be overwhelmed from certain sounds. That would be more over-responsive. Next is touch tactile processing, and this is mostly around pressure, pain, vibration, and temperature. We have receptors in the skin, and it sends information about the location and quality of touch. And it allows a child to determine what they're touching when they're not looking. So reaching into a backpack to pull out a pencil instead of a marker. Differences might look like differences with body awareness, hand use, motor planning. They might be sensitive to clothing tags, textures, getting their hands dirty, avoiding walking on grass. Or on the opposite end of that, they might be seeking a lot of touch input, such as fidgeting, playing with textures and substances, mud, sand, and sometimes even feces. Or smell is the next one. And obviously we have receptors in our nose, and that picks information up about smells that are around us, and it helps us create the flavors we taste in food. And this sense is very linked to our memories and can affect mood. Differences look like craving and seeking out smells with no regard to safety, smelling people or objects, or on the other end, they might gag from smells that most people can tolerate. Gustatory or taste sense, that helps us discriminate between food flavors like sweet, sour, bitter, and the information is received through our taste buds on the tongue. Differences might look like very picky eaters, which is also linked to tactile sensitivity. Differences may also look like they're craving oral input. That can also be a part of seeking. And meal times can be very challenging when you have difficulties with your taste receptors. So those are the five main senses that we all discuss, that we all know about. But there are some lesser known specialized sensory systems that do have a powerful effect on the central nervous system. So we're going to look at those. The first one is the vestibular sense. And another way to say that is movement processing. So knowing where your head is in space. It really affects our balance. So when we move our head, there's fluid in our inner ear and it moves around. And it gives our brain information about the position of our head. It tells us when we are moving, the direction, and the speed of that movement. And it's very important for posture, balance, and coordination. It provides us with what's called gravitational security, which means we can feel safe when our feet are off the ground without falling. So differences might look like what the opposite of that would be gravitational insecurity, which means people who fear their feet being off the ground. They avoid climbing, they avoid slides. They don't like to tip their head back in the shower. They have some difficulties on escalators and curbs. Or they have constant movement. They're seeking movement all the time. And this can really impact motor planning and coordination tasks. They may resist unfamiliar tasks, prefer repetitive play, or they may appear bossy because they need to control the situation into activities that they can tolerate. The next sense is the proprioceptive sense. Another way to say that is a body awareness sense, and it's the sense of knowing where our joints and limbs are positioned. There are receptors in your muscles and your joints, and they are stimulated when you experience any kind of pressure or move your limbs to push or pull, lift or hang. And it allows you to determine your body position in space. And it allows you to regulate the amount of force to use and the direction of body parts. If you're reaching around in the dark for your phone, you're using your proprioceptive sense. Now, differences might look like they have either too heavy or too loose pressure when they're writing or coloring. Sometimes they can be described as a bull in a china shop. They can be very heavy-footed, slamming doors, pushing chairs in too hard, and not intentionally. They don't realize they're doing this. Breaking things often, bumping into things often. They're the kids with bruises that they don't know where they came from. And I've heard an autistic once put it as if they close their eyes, it feels like they're falling off the earth because they have no sense of where their body is without their vision. So that is a way to explain proprioception. And then the last sense we're going to talk about is a newly recognized sense. It's always been there, but we have never really given a name to it until more recently. And it's called interoception. And that is the sense of signals that come from inside your body. So such as your heart beating, breathing, knowing if you're hungry, knowing if you have to use the restroom. And it does have a language cognition component, meaning you have to be able to label it. And there's some mindfulness that comes with that. So differences might look like not knowing or recognizing when you're hungry or full or thirsty, delays with toilet training, either daytime or nighttime. Even identifying when you're tired might be hard. They can be oversensitive or not sensitive enough to pain. Might have difficulty pinpointing symptoms of illness. They just know they feel bad, but they can't figure out exactly what the symptom is. They might have some difficulty identifying emotions in the self or others. And difficulty recognizing building signs of distress. So they might not realize their needs until they're in a full meltdown. So it's really hard for them to use coping strategies, even if they've learned them in the time of distress. So how do sensory needs affect our regulation and daily functioning? First, they help us regulate our emotions, behavior, and attention. Sensory processing differences can significantly influence how individuals regulate their emotions, behavior, and attention. For many, sensory input can either be calming or overstimulating, which directly affects their ability to stay focused and manage their feelings. It's very important to remember that we have to meet sensory needs. When sensory needs are properly met, individuals are better able to engage with their surroundings. They can absorb new information and they can participate socially. Conversely, when sensory needs are not met or ignored or not accommodated for, it can lead to dysregulation. And that's where a person just becomes overwhelmed, anxious, or distracted. It also impacts our ability to engage in self-care, sleep, social interactions, motor skills. Some ways it can affect self-care, specifically, routines like brushing teeth, taking a shower, or getting dressed might be difficult if certain textures or sensations are uncomfortable or distressing. Can affect sleep patterns. For example, if you have sensitivity to noise or light, it can make it difficult to fall or stay asleep. Socially, situations like loud environments, strong smells, or crowded spaces, it can lead to discomfort or withdrawal, impacting the ability to socialize and form connections. And then motor skills. Sensory processing can really influence coordination and motor skills. And that affects tasks like fine motor control or balance, such as fine motor skills like writing, cutting with scissors, or sports activities. A lot of kids with sensory processing differences avoid sports or more gross motor tasks because their bodies won't let them do it naturally. They have to be taught more specifically, more explicitly. And then focus and attention, overstimulation or lack of sensory input can really make it difficult to concentrate, which affects academics, work productivity, and the ability just to follow basic instructions. Now, some thoughts about the experiences of autistic individuals and their sensory challenges. First off, we have to know that sensory challenges are a part of the diagnosis criteria for autism in the section B. And the exact wording is hyper or hyporeactivity to sensory input or unusual interest in sensory aspects of the environment. For example, apparent indifference to pain and temperature, adverse response to specific sounds or textures, excessive smelling or touching of objects, visual fascination with lights or movement. So sensory processing is a diagnostic criteria. Second, we have to remember that autistic individuals often experience sensory differences much more intensely and much more frequently than others. And it can feel like a trauma response, so a fight, flight, or freeze response. When someone's experiencing sensory overload, it's important to remember this. And what's the first thing to go in a trauma response? It's usually the use of higher level language skills and cognitive abilities that rely on the frontal lobe of the brain. This means when you say use your words to a kid who's in a meltdown, it's probably not going to work because their words are not accessible at the moment. We should also be mindful to use as few words as possible in these moments. They might not be able to verbalize what they need or even know what they need in that moment. And they definitely cannot process a lot of words coming from us. And we have to remember that each autistic experience is uniquely their own. So if we understand this, we can help create environments and supports that are more comfortable and accommodating for their specific sensory needs. And a few other points, we have to remember that while sensory differences can present challenges, they can also be a source of unique strength and perspectives. So not all sensory experiences are negative, and many autistic individuals find deep joy in certain sensory experiences, like the feel of soft textures, the sight of specific colors, or sound of particular music or rhythms. If you've heard of the ASMR phenomenon, this is a good example of this, where they listen to just everyday objects repeatedly. And sometimes stimming behaviors like hand flapping or jumping are simply expressions of happiness. It doesn't always mean they're in distress. Sensory processing differences also can be described as sensory diversity, and we have to remember that these differences, again, are not inherently negative, and it may just be a simple variation of how some experience the world. Everyone has a unique profile, and we have to recognize that these are natural and part of the human experience. This helps us promote more inclusive and supportive settings. And we have to recognize the need for accommodating so that they feel comfortable and they can function effectively in various settings. This could include providing quiet spaces, offering sensory tools like fidgets or noise-canceling headphones, and being mindful of sensory triggers in the environment, such as schools, workplaces, and public spaces. And accommodations are not about fixing the person, but rather about creating environments that are inclusive and supportive of everyone's needs. There is an architect in New York, his name is Jonas Schatz. His goal is to develop a building code for cognitive and neurological disabilities that is equivalent to the American with Disabilities Act, or ADA. He says, we have building codes that protect people with disabilities we can see, but we lack the same codified protection for people whose disabilities we can't see. And there is a link to this article in the PDF. So how can you support autistic individuals? Creating sensory-friendly environments. We have to consider lighting, smells, perfumes, candles, textures, visual clutter. Whenever possible, use light covers or natural lighting to create a calmer space. Think about providing different seating options to allow for movement. Providing sensory tools, making sure there are a variety, like fidgets, headphones, seating with movement options, and snacks that offer different sensory experiences, like beef jerky, gum, sour gummies, mints. They can really make a big difference in helping someone regulate. And providing picture visuals of common sensory tools and preferences can also be beneficial, especially for those who might find it hard to express themselves when they're feeling overstimulated. Offering predictability and preparation for sensory changes. Trying to keep a visual schedule handy and encourage people to check items off as they go. This helps build a sense of predictability. Whenever possible, give them a heads up about any changes using both visuals and words. And if an unexpected change does come up, it's helpful if they've had some pre-teaching of the regulation strategies they can use, like social stories for handling change, visual timers, first-then boards, deep breathing techniques, or calming toys. For example, you might show them a video of what a fire drill might look like, or what to do if their favorite ice cream flavor is out before it happens, so that they can be prepared when it happens. Respecting individual sensory preferences and needs. As much as you can, try to avoid overwhelming someone with too much sensory input. Give them space and time they need to engage in sensory activities that help them regulate. Maybe that means extra alone time after a busy day at the fair, or letting them stand while they're doing their work, or watching a movie if they need to rock, or stand while they're watching a movie or if they need to rock, or keeping the radio volume low if it bothers them. Using paper towels instead of loud hand dryers. The key is to be flexible and accommodating because everyone's needs are different. Understanding that stimming and other sensory-seeking behaviors are important. It's crucial to approach these sensory preferences with compassion and understanding. And remember, they can't control how their brain processes sensory input. It's very important to validate their experiences, even if they are different from your own. And I think we all could use a little bit of that these days.
Thank you, Lindsay, for all that wonderful information that you shared. I hope everybody has found that beneficial. So now let's kind of move into kind of the application part. And we're going to talk a little bit about the benefits of sensory spaces and corners. Again, creating a sensory space is a practical and very impactful way to support individuals with diverse sensory needs. Even with the limited space, it's possible to design an effective sensory area. So let's explore how to do this, starting with understanding the importance of these spaces in various settings. Providing a safe, calming space for sensory regulation. Sensory spaces serve as a sanctuary within potentially overwhelming environments. They offer a controlled environment. Sensory spaces allow for careful curation of sensory input. This control is crucial for individuals who may be easily overwhelmed by the unpredictable sensory experience of a typical environment. Predictability. The consistent nature of a well-designed sensory space provides a sense of security. Users know what to expect. It helps reduce anxiety and promote a feeling of safety. Personalization. These spaces can be tailored and should be tailored to meet the individual needs, offering specific sensory tools or experiences that are known to be calming for that user. Escape from overstimulation. In busy environments like our schools and even workspaces, a sensory space offers a retreat where the individual can decompress and reset their sensory system. Positive associations. Over time, users will develop positive associations with these spaces, viewing them as safe havens where they can relax and self-regulate. For example, a student who becomes overwhelmed by the noise and activity of a classroom might use a sensory corner within the classroom with some noise-canceling headphones, a weighted blanket to help calm their nervous system. This safe space allows them to regulate before returning to the learning environment, but still keeps them within the classroom. Promoting self-regulation and reducing sensory overload. Sensory spaces are powerful tools for fostering self-regulation skills. Recognition of need. Regular use of the sensory space can help individuals become more aware of their sensory needs and state of their regulation and dysregulation. Again, our goal is always to build independence, so allowing them to be aware of that is amazing. Autonomy and regulation. These spaces really empower individuals to take an active role in managing their sensory experience. Again, promoting that independence and self-efficiency. Diverse regulation strategies. Well-designed sensory spaces offer multiple options for regulation, allowing users to experiment and discover what works best for them, because it will take time to learn those differences. Proactive measurements. By providing spaces for regular sensory breaks, these areas can help prevent sensory overload before it occurs. Again, if we can be proactive and put those antecedent-based interventions in place, that is always our goal. We don't want anybody getting overwhelmed. So again, as individuals learn how to read their own body and discover what their needs are, then this is a great proactive management step. And then lastly is stress reduction. The calming environment of a sensory space can help lower stress hormones, promoting a more balanced physiological state. For instance, an office worker might use a sensory corner during their lunch break, engaging with some calming visual stimuli or using some deep pressure tools that are available. This proactive step allows them to manage their own sensory needs throughout the day and reduces the likelihood of overload and burnout. Enhancing focus, concentration, and overall well-being. The benefits of a sensory space extend well beyond the immediate regulation, positively impacting the various aspects of functioning. So some other areas it helps with are improved attention. After using a sensory space, many individuals report enhanced ability to focus on a given task. This opportunity to regulate can help clear that mental fog and reduce distracting sensory input. Increase productivity. By providing regular opportunities for regulation, sensory spaces can help maintain that optimal arousal level to allow them to work on their learning tasks or regular work tasks. Better emotional regulation. The physiological calming effects of a sensory space often translate to improved emotional control, reducing incidences of emotional outbursts or even shutdown. Enhanced learning. In educational settings, access to sensory spaces support better information process and retention by ensuring students are in that optimal state for learning. Parents, this is going to be a big one, improve sleep patterns. Regular use of calming sensory spaces, especially before bedtime, can contribute to better sleep quality and duration. And then, of course, there are social benefits. When individuals are well regulated, they're often better equipped to engage in social interactions, potentially improving those relationships and reducing that social anxiety. Physical health. Stress reduction and improved regulation can have positive impacts on physical health, potentially reducing stress-related health issues. And then last but not least is self-esteem and confidence. As individuals become more adept at managing their own sensory needs, they often experience increased confidence in their ability to navigate various environments. Again, for example, a child who regularly uses a sensory space at school might show improved academic performance, better peer relationships, reduced anxiety about attending the school. For an adult who incorporates sensory regulation breaks into their workday, they might experience increased job satisfaction, improved work quality, and just a better work-life balance. It's important to note that while sensory spaces offer a numerous number of benefits, they should be part of the holistic approach for supporting sensory needs. They work best when combined with other strategies such as a sensory-friendly environment modifications, skill building and self-regulation, and education for peers and caregivers about the sensory differences. Moreover, the design and use of sensory spaces should be flexible and responsive to individual needs. What works for one person may not work for another. Needs may change over time, even for individuals. Regular assessment and adjustments of these spaces ensure that they continue to meet the needs of the evolving user. Sensory spaces offer a powerful tool for supporting individuals with diverse sensory needs. By providing a safe space for regulation, promoting self-management, and enhancing overall functioning, these areas contribute significantly to creating a more inclusive and supportive environment. As we continue to recognize and value sensory diversity, the implementation of sensory spaces in various settings, from schools to workplace to healthcare facilities and even public spaces, represent an important step in a more accommodating and understanding society. Creating a sensory space or corner is a practical and impactful way to support individuals with diverse sensory needs. Even with limited space, it is possible to design an effective sensory area. So let's explore how to do this, starting with understanding the importance of these various places. The importance of sensory rooms in various settings. So let's look at offices. In workplace environments, sensory spaces can significantly enhance employees' well-being and productivity. They provide a retreat for overwhelmed employees to recharge, a space for mindfulness and stress reduction, support for neurodivergent employees, and potential improvement in job satisfaction and retention. In classrooms, of course, educational settings, sensory spaces are invaluable for supporting diverse learners. They offer a safe space for students to regulate their sensory input, support students with attention difficulties. They are a tool for managing challenging behaviors and potential improvement to overall classroom dynamics and learning outcomes. In the home, domestic sensory spaces can be crucial for family harmony and individual well-being. They provide a dedicated area for sensory regulation and relaxation, support for daily transitions and routines. They're a tool for managing sensory-related meltdowns or shutdowns, and they have the potential to improve sleep patterns and overall stress levels within the family. In healthcare facilities, therefore our medical community, sensory spaces can significantly enhance the patient experience by helping to reduce anxiety before procedures, supporting individuals with those sensory sensitivities during their hospital stays, and providing a calming environment for individuals with dementia and other cognitive impairment. And then, of course, out in our public spaces, incorporating sensory-friendly areas in public spaces like library, music, museums, shopping centers can really help increase the accessibility and inclusion for all diverse populations. So let's talk a little bit about some key elements when designing a sensory room. When designing a sensory space, consider incorporating these different elements that engage different senses. And some of these things Lindsay kind of talked about just kind of in a broad sense, but lighting. Again, you may want to look at adjustable lighting, dimmer switches, colored lights. You may want to consider some light projectors or lava lamps because this really helps with some visual stimulation. Blackout curtains or shades for light reduction because again, everybody's hyper or hyposensitivity to light is going to be different. So you want to be able to kind of change up to meet the needs of individuals. Sound, some sound dampening materials, maybe carpet, acoustic panels up on the wall, white noise machines or some type of calming music player, noise canceling headphones being available for them. Tactile elements could be just making sure you have various textured surfaces. So it might be some soft cushions in there, some bumpy balls, those flip sequins pillows that were very popular for a while, but I think you can still find them. Of course, there's a wide variety of fidget toys, stress balls, and even with stress balls, there's a different, some are real squishy, some are a little bit hard, some are a little bit more textured. So you want just a wide variety of those tactile elements in there. And then even providing weighted blankets or weighted lap pads. And they're starting to come out with like weighted stuffed animals and different things like that that could be put in a sensory space. And then, as Lindsay mentioned, we've got some other areas that we need to think about that in the past were not necessarily on our radar. So the proprioceptive input, crash pads, if you've not heard about those, they are kind of specially designed pads that go on the floor, and particularly younger children seem to like them more. They can like really just crash into them or fall into them because they like that feeling. But bean bags can also be used for things like that. Just again, you want to make sure that they're safe for the environment that you're putting them in. Resistance bands on chairs or desks. Squeeze machines or hug chairs are popular to help with that as well. And then there's the vestibular stimulation. Rocking chairs, swings, balance boards, wobble chairs, even spinning seats. Again, for young children, sit and spins would probably be a good choice. And then think about your visual organization. You want to keep everything best if they're in like clear, organized storage tubs for your sensory tools. That way people can see what's in there. Have some type of visual schedule or choice board available, and really minimize that visual clutter. Like anything that's up should be for a purpose. And so you just want to watch that visual clutter. And then the olfactory considerations. Again, you may need to look at having a scent-free policy, or more of a gentle, natural scents are only allowed. Some people really like essential oils. Again, just be very cautious with those. Some people do have sensitivities to them, allergies. So use those cautiously, and depending on the type of environment you're in, you may even want to get consent to use essential oils. And then temperature control. Being able to have fans or some other type of personal cooling device available, but also having warm, cozy blankets, maybe even a heating pad can be beneficial as well. So some practical tips and strategies for creating sensory spaces within those limited spaces, because again, we don't all have a whole room to designate. Just utilizing corners. Corners kind of create a natural, safe enclosure that can easily be transformed into a cozy little sensory nook. Using room dividers, so those are those kind of portable screens or curtains, and they can help section off part of a room that you can then turn into a sensory space. Even creating a sensory cart, so this could be a mobile cart that could move around to be used in maybe a work setting, even in a school setting, healthcare. Again, lots of places that these things can be utilized in, but that mobile cart can be filled with a variety of sensory tools and again can be moved around to different areas as needed. Again, depending on your spaces, repurposing a closet. So if you've got a spare closet, it can be converted into a compact sensory retreat. We just recommend that you do not leave the door on there because you would never want to leave someone kind of unsupervised in an enclosed space like that and making them feel like they are being secluded. But again, just that nice little cozy space can be very beneficial for them. And then use of vertical space. So again, think about wall-mounted options that you have, like hanging swings, climbing walls, again, textured walls, things like that, that you can really utilize that vertical space. Flexible furniture is another great thing. You want to use furniture that can serve multi-purposes. Again, it may be used to sit on like a couch, but it may be used to build like a little fort that they can get inside and kind of be in their cozy little place. They may build kind of a little V thing to where they can hang kind of upside down and be in that arch position. So different ways that they can use the furniture to create different spaces, and it can be easily moved. Another really popular thing has just been using sensory tents. So again, it could be any little pop-up tent that you can find anywhere from Walmart to other stores, but they're easy to just kind of pop up, so you can put them up very quickly. They're kind of portable that you can, again, if you need to move them or take them down quickly, you can. And then even utilizing a space under your desk, so the area under your desk can become a really cozy sensory kind of hideout area. And again, that's not taking up any more room in your space. So when you're really limited, like I said, that could be another great option. And then just really, the more that we can design those multi-use spaces, create areas that can transition between sensory use and other functions in our limited spaces is really important, and focusing on that portability, being able to take things from place to place. So you see some examples there in pictures. So you kind of have this little garden area. So again, obviously it serves just as a garden, so you could just sit and look at it, but they've also built in some sensory things of different textures in there, different walking paths so that they can really get in there and explore. And then you see a lot of little portable ideas. So there's like the little pencil box that's full of sensory items. So it looks like they've hidden some sensory things within, like some kinetic sand. Another person has just taken some little boards and applied different sensory items to that. Fidget spinners attached so that students can spin. The little windmill to practice breathing. It looks like there's some flip sequins in there. And then you see the little basket again full of different sensory items like Theraputty. That other picture there, it looks like they've just simply taken some heavy duty Ziploc bags, put some sensory items and sand in there. So again, it's kind of like a hide and seek or a seek and find, but then they've reinforced that with some fun duct tape around the edges. And then in that last picture up in the corner, you see a student or young man just sitting kind of on a wobble chair. So again, if you're in a therapy session, some type of clinical setting, again, you don't necessarily have a lot of space to be able to do some of these things, but simply bringing in like a wobble chair, because they're going to be sitting anyways. And it even looks like he has a weighted thing around his neck. Could be some type of animal. Again, I know they're coming out with lots of things like snakes and monkeys and stuff that can hang on individuals. So we have provided in the resource guide for this presentation lots of examples, and of course if you Google you'll find them, but there are tons of cost-effective solutions and do-it-yourself ideas. Again, we've provided a lot of the recipes that we found. If you have other ideas, send them to us and we'd be happy to add them for other people to use them. But we know, again, we all need cost-effective ideas. So repurpose your household items. Again, this could be maybe using holiday lights for some ambient lighting. creating textured boards from different household materials that you have already in your home, making those weighted items out of rice or beans. Again, you can fill them in things like socks. If you sew, obviously you can make different tubes and things like that, but just the rice and beans can add a nice little weighted element to that. Use thrift stores and yard sales. Look for those soft fabrics, interesting textures, and other potential sensory items. Do-it-yourself sensory bottles. Again, that really helps create those calming visual stimuli. Usually it's filling the bottle with water, some type of glitter, but there's lots of other items that you can put in there in different sizes, glitter, and different color food coloring. Again, you can make your own weighted lap pad by sewing a pad and again filling it with rice, beans, or even those poly pellets. You can create your own crash pad by using some old pillows and blankets to create a soft landing space. Just make sure that it's thick enough that depending on the size and weight of your student, that it is in fact providing enough cushion, because you definitely don't want a student crashing into that and maybe they're a larger or heavier student and therefore there's not enough padding between them and the floor. So just be very mindful of that because we don't want anything else impacting their sensory system. Fidget toys, again, that you can use everyday items, key rings, beads, rubber bands, can all create some simple fidgets. It's really just knowing your individual, what they might like and how safe they will be with some of those items. Again, rubber bands are going to be great for some people, but some of my littles that I work with, it's going to go straight to the mouth and that's going to present a dangerous situation. So I would not utilize them there. So again, it's really knowing your student or individual that you're working with and individualizing as much as you can. Again, we've already talked about kind of building that cozy little corner area and that there's lots of ways that you can do that. Even, remember when we were kids, we built like the blanket forts. So again, there's lots of ways to do this. Get creative, have fun with it. Create visual supports. Again, just laminate visuals that you're using, or you can even use small whiteboards to kind of write down the schedule or the choice board for them. Repurposing old cardboard boxes, again, can become a great little sensory thing because it can be that little hideout or crawl space that you can make for them. So, like I said, lots of cost-effective ways to do that. When possible, involve the autistic individual in the design process. Including them in the process really kind of helps create this truly effective and personalized area. So just some suggestions if you're considering doing this or you have an individual that you want to do this with, of course, is just direct consultation. And that simply means just asking the autistic individual about their sensory preferences and needs. What helps them feel calm? What sensory experiences do they enjoy or find challenging? Of course, simple observation. This one's very effective in young children. Pay attention to the sensory seeking or the sensory avoiding behaviors the individual has in the space. These can really provide some valuable insight into their needs. Sensory exploration sessions provide a variety of sensory tools and observes which one they gravitate towards or which ones they avoid. Do gradual introduction. Introduce elements of the sensory space one at a time, allowing the individual to provide feedback on each new addition. And again, you're going to find out which ones are most effective and which ones they possibly are avoiding. Really big, because I'm huge on communication. Respect their communication style. Remember, communication isn't always verbal. Pay attention to those nonverbal cues and behaviors that indicate their preferences. So again, any mode of communication, accept it, but really look for those things other than just the verbal communication about what they're enjoying and what they're not enjoying. Offer choices, and more choices. We want to present options for different elements for the different sensory spaces. We want to allow the individual to choose and have a say in what they use, how it makes them feel. Take that ongoing feedback, regularly check in about the effectiveness of the space, and be open to making changes. We can create a space An individual may use it, but that doesn't mean that same space is going to be effective for them a year from now. They're going to grow and develop, and we need to make sure that we're growing and developing with them. Empower that decision making. Allow the autistic individual to have the final say on the elements. Again, we're really trying to make this their own personal sensory space, so we need to empower them in having some say in that. Consider different sensory sensitivities in the design process itself. The act of designing may seem a little overwhelming for some, but break it into manageable steps and provide those breaks as needed. And then, of course, involving the autistic adults. If you are working with autistic children who maybe can't communicate their needs and desires, you might consult with an autistic adult who can help provide some insight from their own personal lived experiences. Creating a sensory space, even with limited area, is an achievable and worthwhile endeavor. By understanding the importance of these spaces, incorporating key sensory elements, and utilizing practical strategies for the small areas, as well as exploring cost-effective solutions, and most importantly, involving autistic individuals in the design process, we can create effective sensory spaces that truly meet the needs of all users. We would love to see the pictures of what you create. You can email them to us on the addresses provided on the screen. These spaces, whether in offices, classrooms, homes, or public spaces, have the potential to significantly improve the quality of life, enhance learning and productivity, and promote overall well-being for individuals with diverse sensory needs. As we continue to recognize and value neurodiversity, the implementation of sensory spaces represent a concrete step towards creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for all. Please take a moment and scan the QR code or go to the website listed on the screen. This will provide you additional resources that we have discussed throughout this training and other resources that we just did not have time to meet today. And then on this slide, we encourage you to follow Kentucky Autism Training Center on our various social media platforms. Of course, we have our website that is chock full of information and resources for you. We have our YouTubes, which you can watch videos such as this on, but we also have our Facebook, Instagram, and X accounts that we post current information on, different programs that we have going on. So just check us out there. And lastly, again, we thank you for viewing this webinar. If you will please take a moment to fill out this evaluation. This is valuable information that helps us grow and to know what we need to continue to meet your needs. There will also be an option on there to be entered into a quarterly drawing where we give out some fabulous prizes. So again, if you'll just take a moment, scan the QR code and complete that evaluation, we would truly appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for your time today.